I think that has something to do with that. And I think then it comes down to laziness. It comes down to what is comfortable, what is known. Because I think a lot of people struggle with change because it's unknown and they don't know how they fit into that change. And that scares them.
Welcome to Share.Care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.Care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.Care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello and welcome to a Pondering Life episode of the Share.Care podcast. Our belief is that global peace starts at home. Feeling safe, valued, and heard gives you a foundation to confidently step out and make the world a happier and safer place for everyone. Because in today's world, it's in your own interest to help others. Now, today, it is my wonderful and great pleasure to welcome back Stefan Stefansson. Now, he's a passionate, solution-orientated relationship coach focused on inspiring men to achieve fulfilling relationships, being present, and to have self-growth. Welcome back, Stefan.
Thanks, Damien. Always a pleasure to come back.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to chat with you as well. And we've got an interesting topic. I love it. And this is your topic too. You take full credit for this, but I love it so much. It's why do some people resist change and other people embrace it? And it's a question that's really fascinated me because I look at in life now, and maybe it's because I did resist change a lot and I'm trying to work out why I did that. But now I look at it and go, it's so easy. Why do we make things so hard? What do you think, causes people to go through this process of repeating, basically, as a friend of mine puts it, slamming their fingers in car doors?
I think it comes down to partly laziness and partly people not always thinking what they're doing. And it's falling into bad habits as well. I kind of noticed one thing and kind of through my kind of life with actually it's quite interesting. This particular thing, I just started thinking about it as we was talking about this topic, is that when you get into relationships where when you're on your own, you're usually much more fitter, much more happier, not happier, that's maybe the wrong word.
Some people are.
Much more fitter, more fitter and active and doing more stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on who you date. If you're dating someone, you might be very much having single.
But it seemed to be like, at least for me, I'm just talking from my own experience. And as you mean, it depends on how you date and what your kind of lifestyle and focus are. And I think it's a lot of the stuff, like when you are in a relationship with somebody else, you're accommodating that other person. And maybe that other person has a different lifestyle to yourself. They're not as active. And I think that can lead to different behaviors and falling into maybe a more of a relaxed lifestyle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or there is stress around you that and then you pick up those bad habits like smoking or drinking or whatever it is because of the stress factors or there's something bad happening in your life. And then when you fall into that space or doing, it's about what they talk about the habits. Like it's that whatever habit you pick up, if it's a good one or a bad one, it's always difficult to change something. And I think that's where people struggle the most, is when they fall into something and then either adjusting or fixing it is always the most difficult part of this.
Yeah. I mean, because I look at that with the relationship component, and there was always, I seem to be very accommodating, and someone would want something. And I know in a couple of long-term relationships that I was in, I was very accommodating. And then, that person would say, I want, I'm shortening it to get the story, but they go, I want this. And I go, okay. And I'd do that. And they go, I want this as well. And so I'd do that. And then I found after a period of time, I was a completely different person and I wasn't happy with who I was, because I just completely changed who I was, trying to please the other person. And it became really difficult, because then I'm getting really frustrated and like, hang on a minute, why am I doing this? And I wasn't getting anything in return. It wasn't, I thought I'd be accommodating, and then when I wanted something, it wasn't coming back. It was like, how dare you want that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that kind of you fall into that. I think it's with a lot of you. You tend generally people want to please people, right?
Mm.
And then, especially when you're in starting a relationship, that you start with pleasing maybe the person a little bit too much, and you kind of lose yourself. And then we have heard that in many environments, like people lose themselves in a relationship, or they start doing something they would not really wanted to do, and then to break out of that habit is, I think, it it's like it's like when anybody gives you advice, right?
Mm.
Usually, if somebody gives you advice and it's free, you don't really listen to it. Usually, if you pay for it, then you would pay much more attention to that particular advice.
And it's much
And I
cheaper,
think
because
it's
you end up paying for it in the long run if you don't listen to the advice, because it hurts you a lot more. Well, that's my experience.
exactly, exactly. And it's like somebody was telling me, like with people that want to lose weight, it's like I'm going to have this one more piece of cake, or eat a little bit more of this chocolate. And you think, and then the combat work was then, okay, if you do that, then you need to do more exercise to get it off. It's like instant in the month, like a mile on the hips or whatever kind of
Yes.
what the term was.
Second on the
And
lips,
it's
mile on the hips. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So and it's all about that perception of putting your mind of thinking, and it's like you can't really ask anybody to change if they're not ready to change.
Mm. And is that the same of yourself as well? You don't know, because I mean, I look at, there's a number couple, like I said, I repeatedly went out with a similar sort of person that wasn't. I think the term now is female COVID narcissist. I've seen that used a few times, and it's like there's
Oh,
a
really?
certain type. Yeah, there's quite a bit on out there at the moment, from female psychologists warning of the female COVID narcissist. They
Oh, really?
yeah, and so it was uh, but I was looking at that, and I, you see, why do we resist change? And I'm looking at that as I look back at my history and going, why did I keep going out with this same type of person? What was it? Why was I attracted to that? So I guess when as I'm talking through, I'm not really resisting it, but I just wasn't even aware that I was doing that. When I became aware of it, I started to notice it, and started to notice those behaviors right up front. And all of a sudden, so I'd meet someone and go, "Oh, hang on a minute, that's the same as before." And I'd go, and then I'd test it a couple of times, and then go, "No, I don't want that." But before that, I wasn't even aware I was getting. It's kind of like the frog in the pot that's slowly boiling. You don't realize you're in it, and then all of a sudden it's too late. Um, is it an awareness thing that you need to be aware that this is, something that's causing you grief?
I think there are actually there's two things to this. I think because I was reading a very interesting article or book on this. Is that one is that we seem to track what are we kind of missing in our lives, or what are we missing in our youth, or what are we kind of used to in our youth. So like
Mm,
there's a lot of these saying you're dating your dad or you're dating your mom or whatever it is.
mm,
Like
yeah.
like you have the same tendencies as you had to, or and it seems to be that you're chasing something that you found lacking in your previous relationship, and then kind of you kind of
Mm,
repeat that pattern. And I think and I think I agree with you. It's a lot about, it's like you mentioned the frog in the pot. It's that if you're not aware about it, and that's why I like reading some of these self-help books, is because it's this aha moment. It's not like
mm,
they're telling you something groundbreaking and like I never knew this. Is more, it puts you in a frame of mind. Oh, I didn't think about it from this side of things, or I didn't really see it from that angle.
mm,
Um, and I think that's one of the things that I really like about self-help books, is that it's a putting your thoughts into either your environment in a way that you didn't really think about it before, or somebody's having the same issues,
right.
and you can relate to those issues, and you can think, okay, he responded that way. Maybe then next time when this happens to me, then I remember that and I will respond in that way. And it's like with like people talk about like going down the rabbit hole on something, and you just get
The
so
Matrix.
focused and like and you just can't get out of it. You can't see yourself out of it. And I think a lot of that is stepping back and then catching yourself before you fall in too deep into that rabbit hole. You just catch yourself and say, okay, I'm doing this again. This is maybe not healthy for me.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think it's the self-awareness is very important here. In knowing that.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Then knowing like those patterns that you're falling in, because I can totally relate to what you said, because in my first couple of relationship, my relationship in hindsight, looking at them, they were very similar. They were, and I tended to date the same type of person, and they were not good for me in any shape or form. And I didn't really realize that after 2 long term relationships, that was just not what I wanted. And then when I came back out of those 2 long relationships, I actually started to fall into another one was very similar, and then I was able to say, oh no, this is not what I wanted. And it's that, and I think it comes with, I think, a lot of these things, as we are obviously getting a little older than other people here, is that it's about you get that with experience. It's like I always feel I learn best when I fail, because it sticks with me and I learn from it. And instead of something that just goes easy and I can do it and I don't sit with me as long. So that kind of helps me a lot to kind of being able to not saying you always have to fail, but I think with the failure is we don't do much more reflecting than we would do when we don't fail. Because when you don't fail, you do something on like an autopilot, and you don't really sit down and reflecting. I think that's one of the things that we're losing in our society today, is with everybody having a phone at hand and having that constant beratement of information and social media and whatever it is, news at our fingertips, and just so much content out there, that we are really, really poor at sitting in silence and doing nothing. That we like and just doing a reflection. And that's why meditation and breathing is so coming in now. And I read a really good book a couple of months ago called The Breath, and I highly recommend people reading it. And it's all about controlling your breath.
It's The Breath, and by who is it by?
I can't remember, but I can dig it up for you.
I'll put it in the show notes if you send it through. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and it's really it came out just recently, and it's all about this journey of a guy looking into what breath did for you and how it would help you, and it comes a little bit into the meditation side of things as well, and it's just very fascinating journey that he went on, and very informative. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, and I love what you're talking about there, because it's really interesting that you've raised the point. Because I make these notes where you were talking about, but the pain. Because a friend of mine, she said to me, she said, "You learn through pain until you learn to learn through joy." And I think what you've mentioned there as well, I made this note that pain causes reflecting, because you get to that pain state. Because how often have we heard people say, you need to hit rock bottom. And rock bottom is kind of the varying degrees, but it's where do you think that's that pain becomes so much that it causes you to reflect, and that's the point where you wake up?
I think it's partly that it's kind of shaking you up. It's that shake up of when a pain, it doesn't have to be a pain, or it needs to be some event happening. And I think it's more because as you know, if you're always happy, you're in that autopilot, and you don't really realize what happy looks like. If you're always happy, then you don't know what you're actually in a good space. If that makes sense.
Kind of like water, the water you've got in your background.
Exactly. If you have a lot of it, you don't really. But if you don't have money, then you're struggling for it.
Yeah.
And I think with a lot of that is it comes back to that we're just not very good at self-reflection. Except when somebody is really causing you. It's like when you fail in a relationship, or a loved one passes away or something. then you start to think, I should have spoken to that person more often. I should have gone and visited more often. I should have called more often. But at the time when it's actually happening, it's like you are just going through the motions kind of thing that you don't really, you just get on with your life. And life is getting in the way and all those kind of things. Is that I think we as just a society in general, we just really need to start to slow down and just appreciate ourselves more and be not so hard on ourselves. Because it's like with anybody who's talking about, like everybody will fail at some point.
Yeah.
But don't beat yourself up. Just dust yourself off and try again, because that is one of the main things here.
Is that failure is part of that not resisting change is because what we're doing is familiar, even though it might be painful, but to do something else, you're risking failure and we're trying to avoid that.
Like we obviously, we are brought up, generally, I think this has to do with a little bit of a society issues as well. We are brought up that failure is not good. And we're hammered into us that that we shouldn't fail, we shouldn't be afraid, and things like that. And I think more and more what people are seeing is we need to have that balance emotion on all that spectrum, because as I mentioned before, if you're always happy, you don't really know what happy is, because you have nothing to compare it with.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And and I think that just gets and I think for me, what I feel struggling a bit is that we are just getting very frustrated or scared when we are on our own. That saying that like being on your own is a bad thing. But I think we need to know or be more willing to be on our own now and then, because that even if you're in a relationship, is that it's actually is beneficial that each party does have their own way of doing things, or have their own hobbies and stuff like that, and then you meet in the middle, because it creates. Because someone was actually telling me the other day, actually we're talking about now, is actually better for couples to sleep in separate rooms than actually in the same room, because it keeps that kind of a
what if it's cold?
Mystery going. And I mean, like even another thing, like is a term that they refer to it as the Scandinavian duvets. That means you don't have one big duvet on your bed; you have actually two separates. And actually, that gives you your own independence in the fight of your duvet, so you're not always fighting over it. So, me being Icelandic, that I grew up always, there were always two separate duvets in a bed. But then when I moved to London, it was like, no, that didn't look very nice on the bed. Like two, no, you have to have one. It looks much prettier. So it was all about like how it looked. So I was like, okay, interesting. And I think it comes down to kind of the perception of how comfortable you can actually be in your own skin, and how good we are to ourselves. I think it's like my kind of need to remind my 11-year-old daughter sometimes, is that when she's getting very hard on herself, and then I'm kind of reminded that, would you be that hard to your best friend when something fails? Or would you say like, I'm horrible, this doesn't work or that doesn't work, like, but would you say that to your friend? And I think in a lot of these cases we need to remember that we actually need to be our best friends.
Is that, I mean, from that perspective, is that part of the reason why we resist change? Is that, again, that this fear of failure, we're hard on ourselves, and we're beating ourselves up a lot, and not really allowing ourselves to go, well, actually, I could do this a little bit different. Because we're beating ourselves up so much, we're not even focusing that there could be a different option available.
I think definitely, and I think as well, we give up. We will say to ourselves, no, I won't be able to do that. This is too hard for me. So we actually give up before we actually try. And so it's and I think that's like the resisting the change is as well. What it's like, I find as well as I get older that change, I will change. There's some change because I'm kind of had a routine in place, and I like my routine, and I like things in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that comes to as well, like people talking about, yeah, you're just an old git and you're stuck in your own way of thinking on things. I think that has something to do with that. And I think then it comes down to laziness. It comes
Mm-hmm.
down to what is comfortable, what is known. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people struggle with change because it's unknown and they
Yeah.
don't know how they fit into that change, and that scares them. And then it comes back to the fear and being scared and not kind of believing in yourself and having your own internal dialogue and saying you're not good enough.
Because that comes back to our beliefs, doesn't it? Because our beliefs create our reality. So if we've got an internal dialogue saying that we're not good enough and we can't do it, then it's not
Yeah,
really, I guess we're not really resisting change. We just don't even believe it's possible.
yeah.
So how does someone do, I mean, how do you become aware of that? Is it do you have to get to that pain rock bottom to make that change?
I think a lot of times it's as we were talking about before. You don't really start the reflection till you
Mm,
end in rock bottom, or
mm,
you are in such a desperate situation that you can like, because a lot of these things, like people, when you get into a desperate, there are two ways. Like some people will just give up and that goes badly, and then other people that will actually catch themselves and say okay, and that sometimes does not happen till they are in that rock bottom. Or like when people I've seen it with a lot of men, because we tend to, unfortunately, when we get into relationships, get lazy and not invest as much in the relationship as we did maybe in the first courting months of our relationship when we meet somebody new.
yeah.
Is that, and then all of a sudden we forget and we get comfortable and we start watching the football day and kind of lay back, and then we're not really investing in it anymore. And then all of a sudden our partner comes up and says, we not never do anything anymore. You're not into me anymore.
Mm,
And then all of a sudden, oh, and I think we should end our relationship. And then all of a sudden, sorry, like, and now then you want to do all the things and fix everything and be awesome about it.
yeah.
And I think that a lot of the times, I think it comes down to um, laziness, inactivity, and just being too comfortable with something, and you're not really doing that reflection of what it actually could mean to actually put the effort in.
What do you think causes that laziness?
I think it comes into being comfortable,
Right.
being especially if you're busy, stressful lives, and then you want to get into that comfortable. And that's why, like, television is so such a difficult thing. Is that it's easy medium? Is that something that will entertain you, and you just sit there and you kind of can kind of what's the word,
Binge
check out
watch?
a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you check out. You don't really
Yep.
need to be doing anything, and it's kind of a, yeah. And I think it's like just it's there's e- uh, e- uh, kind of adds invitation to that comfortableness, so the little bit of
Mm.
the lazy lifestyle, in regards to, you ever had a busy day and you just want to not having to think about anything at the moment.
Do you think it comes back to that laziness as well, being comfortable, but also where does having a purpose fit into? Because I look at my life now, and I'm pretty busy all the time, but I have a very big purpose of what I'm trying to do. It's really important to me. I've got a number of goals that I want to achieve, and so I find it difficult to actually sit there. I mean, I have a couple of shows that I like to watch NASCAR, so I'll watch the NASCAR race. I
Yeah,
like the robot fighting battle bot, so when that's on, I'll watch that. But I also structured around what other things that I've got to do. Outside of that, if I've got so much to do because I've got all these goals that I've set myself, and a purpose, a bigger mission that I want to help on a large scale. So that keeps me very busy, and it's difficult for me to be lazy. But I like that. Is there something along those lines where it's not having a purpose? If you've got nothing to do, of course you're going to gravitate to social media or whatever is in front of you. Is that generally the case, or?
I think that's actually something interesting. Like, it's obviously when you have a purpose and you have a focus, then you always then it, as I said, it brings you that focus and gives you that meaning. And I think absolutely, I think that has something to do with as well when you get into a way of comfortable life and you kind of learn new stuff and you feel that you kind of achieved everything in your life. And then somebody says you need to change something, but then you say, but it's not really what I want to be doing. And I think that has something to do, absolutely for sure, that will, then you will resist that change because it's not really in your, you focus on your goals that you want to achieve. Because as you get older, like our normal goals would be, you want to have a family, you want to have a house, you want a comfortable job, you want to be able to pay your bills, you want to be able to travel. And if you don't have anything of those, then you're not driven maybe to get there. And I think as well with a lot of the rock bottom stuff that we were talking about earlier, when you are at the rock bottom, then it is a purpose to getting out of it, or you're losing your house, or your wife is walking out of you, or whatever it is, or your health is deteriorated really badly, and you have to start to lose weight, or whatever it is, and then you kind of struggle with it. But then I find as well, if you get to that space, I think it's kind of then you have that somebody pushing you to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Because I mean, I had a friend he had a very successful business and still does, but he got really sick because he was working really, really hard and he was bedridden. And then while he was away, he's still getting reports on what was happening with the company. He just couldn't leave the bed. It was a big company. And when he wasn't in the picture anymore controlling everything, the staff actually flourished and the business actually became more successful with him not being in it. He was still guiding it. And so he then realized, I need to do this differently. And now when he goes into the office, puts his feet up on the desk for a little bit just to show his presence. And then he was riding his motorbike around Mongolia for 3 months because it was something that he wanted to do. Still getting the reports and things that were going on. But it was that, and he was in bed for like 9 months. That's how ill he was. And it was really to do with stress and that's what caused it. But again, that's a case of hitting rock bottom and how to, go, well, he could have died, but he didn't. It's just, I wonder about that, how our beliefs create this scenario where we just keep pushing ourselves until it's so painful that we need to stop.
I think like with that, I think kind of the description of that is like it's referred to as the founder syndrome, right? Where the founder is so involved in thinking that things will not work without him, and he gets so involved, kind of obviously it's his baby, and he wants his baby to grow and be successful, and he thinks he's the only one who can get there. And I think it's with a lot of these things is about being able to step back, and I think more and more kind of I always seem to come back to this thing of self-reflection and meditation and kind of and being good to yourself, because I think a lot of these things we don't really recognize till, as you said, till we hit the rock bottom, and then all of a sudden we do something about it and things get much better.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to get it till we really fail at it.
Well, that's what let's look at it from the opposite side of things. Someone that embraces change, how do they do that? What enables them to embrace change?
I think with to embrace change is that, again, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier. Like if you have that is in your focus or it is your goal, then it seems to be much easier. It's when you are ready for it. I think I find always, like if you talking to people that want to stop drinking or stop smoking or lose some weight, I think with a lot of that, if they are not willing to do it or see it as a thing for themselves, it will only be temporary. They will do it while somebody is telling something, pushing them. But as soon as that person steps out of the picture and is not pushing them, then they will fall back into their habits, or the risk of them falling back into the habits, because nobody's kind of giving them that focus if it's not coming from yourself. If you not want to be healthy yourself, you will do it for that partner, as you mentioned earlier. You will change yourself for a while to please somebody,
Mm-hmm.
but then if that person either falls into the trap of what you did before, then you will follow, right?
Yeah.
So it's about the only way that the accountability will work is if it's in your own focus to do so, and you are the one standing up to yourself to do it.
I'm hearing from that 2 points. One is identity. So you're identifying as this person, which makes you either someone that's resistant to change or embracing change. If you see the world as set in a certain way, it's going to be very difficult to change. Whereas if your identity is to see things as, oh, there's lots of opportunity out there, or if I can adjust to what's going on, that's going to make that process easier. The other point that I was wondering about as you were talking there that I heard, well, and I think I was reading a little bit between the lines there, was that whole philosophy is if I tell you to not think of a pink elephant, you've got to think of the pink elephant. And because you mentioned about smoking, and people struggle to stop smoking, and I know a few people in that category. And I used to smoke, and I could quit anytime I wanted. And the reason I could do that was because I was saying, I want to breathe clean air, I want to be healthy, and that was my focus. That was my move towards. But my friends that I have that can't quit smoking, not can't, but don't quit smoking, they're always talking about how they don't want to smoke. They don't, So is that part of that philosophy of being, resistant to change, is not being aware that you're actually making it difficult for yourself?
I think so as well. I think it's comes down to that awareness, and it comes down to the comfortability. When you're comfortable, like and if you're stressed or whatever, because a lot of it is external factors. Like you will have a cigarette because you're stressed, or you have a drink because you're stressed, or you're doing this, or you're upset, and the day was horrible. Somebody screamed at you, whatever. And it's a lot of, and you will associate that particular act with something that happened. So for instance, a lot of people, when at least the people that I know, will go out for a drink and they will smoke 1 or 2 cigarettes because they are just so used to drinking and smoking together, and it gives you that buzz. But if they're not drinking, they won't smoke. But every time they go out, they will have that 1 or 2 cigarettes. And I think that's kind of it's kind of the association of behaviors.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, and I think, and I think it's more that the more you recognize it, the more you think about it, and I think catch yourself in it. But you're the one that has to catch it, because you can't have always a partner or friend or something knocking that cigarette out of your hand that you go out for a drink.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it has to be kind of, as you mentioned, you stopped smoking because you wanted the clean air. You wanted not to smell like a chimney every time. You didn't want to go out and
kiss someone.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you ever remember, like in the old days, when you could actually go into a nightclub and people would smoke in the nightclub, you get home and you had a shower and you would just that first couple of water, like as the tar was coming off you, you couldn't just, it was revolting, really.
Yeah.
and it would be quite difficult to go back to those days, I think.
Yeah, well, it sounds like too that the part of this is a big part of it seems to be habit. We kind of get into a habit of doing things a certain way, and you mentioned about being comfortable. And to change a habit, you can't just stop a habit. You have to replace it with something else. Is it a case of being aware that it is a habit and you have to replace it with something else, and then that rule of 28, roughly 28 times before you can actually change the habit? You've got to repeat it.
Yeah, I think they talk about 21 days to change a habit or something like that.
Yes, 21 to 28, somewhere in that vicinity. It's more so because they're putting the assumption on that you one time a day that you try it. So it's more that repetitive 21 to 28 tries. before it starts to actually, before you cross the threshold where you're likely to change the habit.
Yeah. I think that the two things with habits, I think as well, that we're not very good at. One thing, we shouldn't stop trying something though, even if we fail once or twice, right? It's and stop beating ourselves up and say, okay, I failed, and then I'm saying, then go straight to your dark place and say, I'm horrible, I'm useless, and I'm worthless, and you stop. Instead of just being kind to yourself and say, okay, it was a bad moment, and we just pick ourselves up and let's try it again, and we'll keep going. And I think, as you're saying, it's about the repetition. And I think it's more about the repetition, and it's more about at least you tried, and be happy that you actually did try. Instead of because a lot of these things, I think it's like a long journey starts with a single step, right?
Yeah.
And remember that one single step is basically putting another foot in front of the other every single time.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's not much more complicated than that. But I know it's simple, but simple, and maybe people call it simple-minded. But I think with anything, and people will come back to, even though I don't want to quote this particular thing, but like Edison, right? There's always ever been talking about he tried to invent the light bulb 10,000 times, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And he didn't give up, right? And people will say that about like Steve Jobs and others, that they failed and they came back and they came stronger than he was one of the most successful men in history. And I think it's like with anything, there's a lot of people out there as well that tried and failed. But I think with a lot of these things is not everything is going to work out. But you need to be understanding in that if you don't try, you won't get there. Because if you talk yourself out of it every single time, yeah, you're bound to fail. It's just you can 100%.
Is it a case then that we actually have a misrepresentation of an expectation that's incorrect? So we're misrepresenting what it actually takes to get where we want to go, and therefore, because I love that you mentioned Edison, more so from the perspective of, and I've talked about this a few times recently, is so apologies for the listeners that are hear the story again, but we've all, people do weird research in my mind, but I'm glad they do, because apparently they've studied how many times a baby tries and fails to learn to walk, and apparently it's around the 8,000 time mark. So everybody here has, on average, some are quicker, some are slower, but tried and failed 8,000 times before they succeeded. So it's a case of, like you say, if you try it once and don't succeed, well, that's kind of a New Year's resolution, because most people don't, don't even try. Actually, I think the number of tries to achieve a resolution in New Year's is less than one, because a lot of people don't even try. But do we need to remember that in respect of, when we're this resisting of change or not welcoming changes, going, well, the reality is it's not going to be, because you've seen, I'm sure you've seen the comics, and they have the top one, the expected path, and it's this smooth road, and then they say what actually happens, and it's all
exactly.
And do you think it's because we give ourselves a false expectation that this is going to be just a smooth ride? And when we're doing anything new, I love the term beginners suck. You're going to suck at it for a while until you get good at it. Is that, we just need to have that change in reality?
Yeah, I think things are. I think coming back to the 10,000 thing or 8,000 with the child. I think I've read something. If you want to be good at sport or any activity, it will take you about 10,000 hours to get there.
Wow. Yeah.
Or to practice it, and it's a quite a long time to do so. Like somebody say, if you want to be good at piano, then you have to practice for 10,000 hours. And it's just the perception of getting that repetition. I think a lot of it is, and I think with change is it's just be willing to try. I think it's the thing. But to be willing to try, it has to be you willing to try, not by somebody else talking you into it. I think that has a lot to do with it. That that change won't happen except if you're willing to take the change on. and I think that's the mindset, and different people look at the different things, and I think it comes down to what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with, and you're telling yourself, yeah, this change, I will never fit into this way of thinking, or I think, but it's because that you already put a stumbling block in front of you when you already said that, instead of, okay, I will have a look at it and do it with an open mind, and then slowly take it on. And then if for any reason it doesn't work on on the day one, don't give up on it straight away.
Yeah.
And I think as well with change is if you think it's actually beneficial for you. And I think it comes back to what you said earlier. If it's not part of your goal, then then a lot of people will resist change. And I think comes as well. And we as human beings are very much geared for being awarded for things. So like when you get to a job and somebody wants to give you a new task to do and add to the job, and then we almost constantly equate that to how much are you going to pay me more for this, and so I think that has something to do with it as well. Is the award system, and we as parents, I think it's has as an issue as well from parents, that how we deal with how we're bringing up our kids in regards to, we make everything so easy for them. And I'm seeing that now with my 11-year-old, and I've kind of failed a little bit in that regards. Is just the simple thing of getting her to understand the value of money. Because if Daddy Bank has always money and it pays for everything, she doesn't equate what that actually things are costing.
Yeah.
And when she starts to grow up and has to start saving and spending own money, is that like, but Daddy will pay for it. It's okay, kind of thing. And it's those kind of things. And the same thing with the kids and tidy up with the tidy. Like we as parents tend to walk behind the child and pick everything up, and not never, and they think magically everything just gets clean and washed and ironed and whatever it is. And I think we as a parent are making ourselves lives easier as well by doing it ourselves, instead of having to call our kids back and say, you have to tidy up, and they say, no, I don't want to, I want to play on Xbox, I want to go out and play football or whatever it is. It's like we have that argument for half an hour to try to convince them, because if they had done it straight away, that would have taken them like 1 minute, and now it's wasted 30 minutes of trying to argue what to do. And so we, in the end, we just give up, do it, and then we move on. And finding, for instance, like if you're in a rush and your child needs to like put her shoes on or whatever, like for you to wait for them to tie the knots will like what would take 5 minutes. I will do 10 minutes. We're out the door. We can do the activity. And I think that has to do as well for us as a parents. And I think it comes down this whole scope of how we just, as we grow older, how we were treated as we were younger. People are seeing much more how our formative years will model or our way of thinking in certain things, and that has something to do with change. If you're always in an environment that it was always the same, nothing ever changed, so then change will be hard for you, because you're not used to it. Like in the old days, people would maybe have the same job for 30 years and work for the same company. Like now, it's almost unheard of for anybody to be in the same company more than 5 to 10 years. And so I think that has something to do with it as well.
Yeah, that point that you're talking about there, where with what you're brought up with, has an impact on how you would perceive the ability to have change. If you're brought up with that ability, or brought up with a thought process or beliefs that it's difficult, or that this is the way it's done, you're really not going to be open to thinking that way. Which is interesting. You mentioned about that, and encouraging that ability to actually deal with those kind of failures as well with children. I had that with my son. He wasn't practicing early on when he was doing karate. He wasn't practicing, and rather than get on his back about practicing, I thought, oh well, I'm just going to let you go, and you're going to fail. Everyone else is going to go to their grading, and they're going to get it, and you're not going to get it. And that's what happened, and he hated it, because I asked him after he left, and he hated it. And similar sort of thing. he's pretty good with putting stuff out. But the other day, it was funny. I asked him to put the recycling out, and he goes, "Yeah, I'll do it later." And okay, and I didn't bug him about it. And the next morning, I woke up, and he hadn't put it out. So I put a whole bunch of the recycling on his computer and just see when he got out of bed. I said, "What did you forget to do?" And he goes, "Yeah, okay." So it just became not beating out. But I was just wondering from that perspective, because you talked about appreciation. And I know from the work that I do with corporations, and I use this all the time in making change happen, because it can instill change in a company really, really quickly. And part of the way I do that is I reward the people that do the things that we want done, and the people that don't do it don't say anything about it. So there's no criticism, because if you criticize people, they become resentful. So
Absolutely.
all I do is, said, okay, everyone has tasks, and the people that do the tasks, they get lots of rewards and praise and thank yous, especially in front of the people that are not. And then all of a sudden, I found that other people want that reward. So they start doing the things that they should be doing, and the change happens really quickly. And what I wondered with that is, do we need to, because you talked about before beating ourselves up, do we need to switch the way we're thinking about things? And if we want to have a change, instead of going, beating ourselves up when we don't do, like if someone wants to quit quit smoking, and then they have a cigarette and they beat themselves up, the whole process becomes really painful to go through, because they're actually making themselves feel uncomfortable. Whereas if they just let it go and focus on, hey, I went 2 days without having a smoke before I did have one, and celebrating that, and let's see if I can go longer, would that, do you think that would shift the whole mindset of how we approach change? Because that it becomes more of a fun, rewarding thing as opposed to something that's painful.
I think there's a lot of research coming out now that positive rewarding is much more powerful than negative.
Yeah.
Now, some people will obviously respond to negative reinforcement, but positive reinforcement seems to be much more powerful, more blunting. And we're not talking about like money always, but just praises, support, acknowledgement, as you mentioned. I think because everybody wants to be liked, everybody wants to get that praise, everybody wants to be known as they did something. I think naming and shaming people is not always a good thing. And I think it's more, as you said, naming and celebrating something they did well will have then a positive effect. Generally, not everybody is the same, and then there's obviously some people are just in a bad space. They can't really recognize what's going on in that sense. Is that it's about acknowledgement that you actually did a good job, and you have been doing well, because I think in the long run, if you feel appreciated, you're much more positive, in a much more positive frame of mind.
Yeah.
If somebody's always blading you, even though you're doing a good job, but you're doing the good job, and nobody tells you you're doing a good job, and then occasionally when they say anything to you, and there's always negative, you will just be disappointed and despondent of wanting to be in doing that, or achieving more for that individual.
Because I was wondering from that perspective on yourself as well, just giving yourself that celebration. I did it because I'm anally retentive. When I lived in Perth, I was driving up the coast, and there's a lot of traffic lights on that road, and I would get frustrated because I'm getting all the red lights. That was my mindset. But because I'm anally retentive, I decided to count. So I had a little notepad next to me, and every time I got to a traffic light, I'd mark it red or green. What it turned out was that I was actually getting way, way, way more green lights. But when I got a red light, I was getting frustrated. And because I got frustrated, it was more emotionally intense. Well, that's what I'm putting it down to now. It was more emotionally intense. It stood out. And I completely forgot about all those green lights that I was getting. So I was just wondering, do we need to also have that perspective when we're dealing with change? When we, as you said, we're going to fall over a number of times. The Edison thing, the number of tries to do that, we're going to fail a number of times. Do we need to reframe it, sort of like how video games are designed? We give ourselves, you play a video game, you play Mario, you get these little reward, little gold coins all the way through till you get to the end. And so you want to keep getting those little rewards. Do we need to have that mindset where we focus on the little things that we did right and celebrate that?
That's the thing, because we have that mindset of we always remember things that went badly much more than because or that made us stand out, or we did something that we were uncomfortable with and we felt ashamed or whatever it is. We always remember that much longer than we will ever do anything we did positive. And it's just, I think it's how our brain is it's kind of wired. So I think we need to just catch ourselves much more, and that's why I think as we mentioned before, the reflection and meditation is so important now. And that we actually look at ourselves as being our best friends, and not always be so hard on ourselves. And if we do fail and we don't take something up straight away, it is okay. There will be another day. We are not going to die from this, and kind of be willing to just keep going.
That reflection is important, because I know from my perspective, I do that a lot, but it's not like I don't meditate or anything like that. I don't know if I mentioned it before or not, but I've got down here at the beach house, got a big lawn. I got rid of the gardener, and didn't get rid of. I just didn't ask him to come back again. It's not like
You didn't go out and
buried him.
That's good to know. That's good to know.
Anymore, you know. But I bought myself a self-propelled lawnmower, which is not one you sit on, but you walk behind.
Yeah. I know what you want.
Yeah, so electric one of those, and battery powered, and I'll go out there and I'll just mow the lawn without having any earphones. Sometimes I do put them in, but I don't turn them on, just in case someone walks on the path behind my property and I don't want to talk to them. I can pretend to ignore them. But I found for me that's such it's not meditating. I'm not sitting there meditating, but I'm just, as I'm going up and down, there's nothing to think about. And so I call it I'm gumping. I'm Forrest Gump on my lawnmower, but it gives a wonderful time to think about things, and that's where I come back to that whole point of learning through pain until you learn through joy. Which I love my friend said that, because now when I'm gumping, I'll be thinking about things and go, oh, how can I do that better? How can I do this better? And it's not because it's painful. It's just I want to improve. I want to be better at it, and that's part of my personal mission statement. Includes learn something daily that helps me overachieve. So it's part of my identity, which we talked about before. But is it that simple? I find it that simple, but can anyone do that?
It is, in my opinion. I agree with you. It is actually that simple. And meditation, in my mind, is not having to sit down and meditation can be in any way. Go for a walk.
Yeah.
Just be with yourself.
Yeah.
And it's about, I think meditation in general is about being on your own, or the solitude of being just you with your thoughts.
Yeah.
And because like people talk about, like, with meditation is like you do focus on the breathing, and if a thought comes in, you take it in and you just let it go. And I think it's a lot of thing about that. It's just being comfortable and having a time for where you and your thoughts. I think that is what kind of meditation is getting towards, is that you are reflecting on yourself.
So if we're going to wind this up, if you were to put it in a nutshell about the difference, if you wanted to, why people resist change and why people embrace it, how would you put that in a nutshell? Why people resist it, why people embrace it, and how do you switch between the two?
I think in a nutshell, it's the fear of change is people are not willing to do change, or that they are just feeling that they're not strong enough, or just the self-esteem is not there. And I think to embrace change, I think it's just take it one day at a time, one step at a time, and don't beat yourself up if it doesn't work straight away.
Yeah, I love that. Stefan, it's always wonderful chatting with you. Thank you for taking the time to share with the listeners. It's just, it's so wonderful to share with you and learn. There's so much there to help people move from resisting change, which can be quite painful, especially if you're repeating slamming your hand in the car door. Stop it. Just stop doing it.
Exactly.
and that you can do something new, but you might have to try a couple of times, and that's okay. Thanks for taking the time, Stefan.
Thanks for having me, Damien. Really appreciate it. Good talk as always.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes for others and for you.